Talking Grit, a Detroit Lions podcast. Powered by the Monroe County Reporters. Here are your hosts, Jason Harwood and Jacob Litton.
Welcome to Talking Grit. I am Jason Harwood. With me, as always, is Jacob Litton. Yes, we are late because of Jacob. It is all his fault. But you see, we have a third man in our crew today, and his name is Karsten. He is, you know him from Pride of Detroit, and we are so happy to have him. How are you doing, Al?
I'm good, guys. So happy you were able to have me on. I'm you're a couple of little grit talkers here. I'm ready to join the fun.
All right. Yeah, we got big news. Offensive coordinator. We were all set to talk about the front seven, right, Al? And then the OC news came down. So now we're gonna get to both topics. I'm excited to talk about both those things with you.
Yeah, and I think we've got a lot of development, so why would we not bother hitting it? And we got a lot of entertaining stuff to go through.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jacob, you got home, no deer. You didn't hit any deer in the weather, right? You're good. You're safe.
Good. Safe ride home. Just got out of work a little bit later than anticipated, so hence the pushback a little bit. Not all of us are working remotely from home, Jason, and can just, not wear pants all day and whatever you do over there.
I wear pajama pants, so give me some respect. I do wear pants. All right. All right, man. Jacob, I'll let you put Al in the hot seat here. Ask him your question that you like to start out
It's
this.
not a hot seat question. You're making Al nervous. This is not how we treat our guests right away.
Oh, that's all right.
Listen, all right. Al, welcome to the show. Always like to ask this just to get an idea of how long you've been in the trenches, I guess. So the question that I always ask, when you think back to when you first became like a diehard Lions fan, so when you really started to care about it, like week in, week out, pay close attention to it, who was the quarterback of that Lions team when you first were all in?
It would have been a combination of the Sean Hill, Drew Stanton, Matthew Stafford era, as Stafford was, first dealing with those injuries and persevering through there. Luckily, they had some great backups, huh?
Yeah. Nice.
Sean, not many people remember Sean Hill's the one that threw the Kelvin Johnson pass that, the whole catch rule, but a lot of people, want to think it's Stafford, but it was Sean Hill that was in that game.
Week 17?
Well, I thought that was early in the season, was it?
Or no, maybe beginning of the season.
I was going to say, Stafford got 1 or 2.
Yeah,
Stafford got hurt. I think that's when they broke his collarbone that game for the first or second time or something, I think.
Well, I don't know. Now we need some research.
We'll have to deep dive into that at the end of the show.
I'm the old guy in the group. I just remember it.
It's interesting because my grandpa had season tickets in the 60s and 70s, but I'm from the west side of the state, so he would drive before 94 was even fully paved. I was one of the few guys who had Detroit Lions ties. Most people I grew up with were Packers fans, Bears fans, and that it's the very southwest county. So I wouldn't even get every Lions game. A lot of the local Fox would be Bears or CBS would be Colts. So wasn't always able to get Lions games early on as a kid.
Yeah. Who was your first jersey, Al?
That was DeAndre Levy. And then Larry Warford, and then Stafford and Kelvin and Sue.
Larry Warford, all right.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Larry Warford. Was upset when he left. My buddy, after I got a Larry Warford, he had a Laken Tomlinson. So those guys ended up having some Pro Bowl seasons elsewhere.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep. All right, that's good. I always like asking the jersey question too. DeAndre Levy was awesome when he was healthy, and then he got injured, and then not so awesome. But yeah, it was. Yeah,
that 13, 14, 15 peak he had, he was right up there as an all-pro linebacker that could just about do everything and eliminate, all three phases of the game. He was fun. He's still on my Mount Rushmore Lions, I think.
Yeah. His unceremonious ending to his Lions career, but up until that point, it was pretty awesome. All right, we're gonna start out with OC talk. Surprise, surprise. Okay, I am so happy that it did not happen mid-show, to the Pride of Detroit guys. They're doing their show, and then it gets announced it'd been one thing if it was Mike McDaniel. I think the whole vibe would have been totally different. But the fact that it was Drew Petzing, a guy that a lot of us we're not familiar with, they were trying to do their research on the show. So I'm going to start with you, Al. Your first thoughts when you hear Drew Petzing is our new offensive coordinator. What were your first thoughts initially?
I was running around doing errands, trying to get home for a appointment to get a window quote. So I was like doing way too many things. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared. And I saw, I had like 100 text messages within like 10 minutes. I had to pull over and get a tweet out. But no, I genuinely was intrigued. I wasn't upset. Like, it looked like most of Lions fan base was sky was falling, looking for negativity and anger yesterday. But I was cool with Drew Petzing. I had remembered hearing about how Kevin Stefanski wanted him to be a tight ends coach, because that's kind of where you learn all facets of the game, and you're able to master your awareness for the whole offense more. So I remember hearing that, reading about that, and then when Jonathan Gannon picked him, they did some really cool things. So I was genuinely curious and optimistic, ready to dive in. I do think it was quite the, ripping the Band-Aid off for fans, given he wasn't one of the 8 rumored people that think if there was that, the ability for them to have known about it, it would have been different. But there was definitely a strong reaction. But my initial reaction was happy. I was okay with it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a home run, but then I felt like I almost, in text messages and with Twitter, I'm like, I almost had to defend. I'm like, do you guys even know who Drew Petzing is? No, you don't. That's why you're having such a negative reaction. So I was just trying to say, it's not as bad as you think just because you don't know.
Yeah. Puts you in a defensive position right away. And I think Jeremy and Ryan and Miko kind of felt that right in the middle of their episode. Jacob, I'm going to turn to you. You've already let me know what your first reaction is, but let everyone that's listening to this know what your first reaction is.
Right. So I texted you the second that it dropped. Just a full disclosure, say initial reaction and was that I don't like it right off the bat, right? And Al kind of already said, that's how most people felt. This, when I first saw the name Drew Petzing, I knew right away, I'm gonna have to do some research and dive deep because right off the bat, I don't know his history. When he's not on the surface, he's not one of these people, that we'd been looking at. And it still feels really early in the cycle. And, you still got Mike McDaniel out there. You still have all these dominoes to fall. So it was just weird that it was Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell feel so strongly this is their guy. They're getting him right now. So first initial reaction was man, that kind of sucks. That's not really doing anything for me. But I also did tell you, and, it's different when you can look a little more analytical or dive a little deeper. I knew that once I research, once I look into it a little bit later, that it's going to be okay. I'll understand the reasoning behind it. But I also knew that, the rest of Lions fandom is going to be on fire over this because all these big names, just like the free agents, right, in the trade deadline, all these big names that everybody wants. And when we don't get them or they go elsewhere, it's, they're calling for Brad's head and all these crazy, ridiculous things. So I will admit, right away, it's this is not a sexy pick. This is not doing anything for me, right off the bat when you hear the name. And I think it would have been the opposite reaction had they announced Mike McDaniel or Dable or, any Todd Monken, any of those big names, the fans would have exploded with a positive reaction. And because now here's this guy, relatively unknown, I guess, to most Lions fans, everybody hates it.
Yep. Yeah. My initial reaction was, who? That's what it was. I got to get into this. I was working, trying to in between my tasks, I'm trying to get any information I can. I had the POD thing up. I was listening to them live, so I was able to get some stuff as they were gathering information. So that was my first initial reaction. And I like to have an open mind about all this stuff. I really do. And so I think my reaction to you, Jacob, is I think you were surprised that I did say I was disappointed right away or whatever. And it was kind of just I was in fact-finding mode and I got to find out more about this guy. So of course I wanted McDaniel. That's the big name. That would have been just it would have been on ESPN ticker right away. It would have been on all this stuff and it would have been really cool to have that. Would it have been the best hire for the Lions in the long term? I don't know that. I really don't know. And I think that that's probably played in the decision for the Lions too, whether McDaniel wanted to come here or not. So, Alan, but now you've had 24 hours to digest. Where are you at now with Drew? Is it changed anywhere? Are you more positive, more negative? Where are you at now that you've had some time to look into it a little bit?
No, I'm still positive about it. Haven't had enough time to continue to dive in more. Like this whole offseason is going to be fun, but I really wish I could go back and look and like kind of rank order the people that we were, before we hired them, who we were interviewing, because like I probably would have felt more comfortable with Petzing than T. Martin or Jake Peets or Mike Kafka or Zach Robinson. Truly, like I did actually like Arthur Smith more than other folks. I was curious by him, but I really don't think outside of Mike McDaniel, he's like any different than some of the other guys as far as like drop off. Like I really think he's an intriguing guy that did a lot of cool things, has 3 years experience, and is still under age 40, and has had this great influence from so many people. I'm still, like I don't even know if I could do the show today if we had hired Mike McDaniel yesterday, because I would have tried to do backflips, would have gotten hurt. So like, there is definitely a significant drop off from Mike McDaniel and the enthusiasm I probably would have had there. But I also understand maybe why Dan Campbell and the coaching staff didn't want to pursue, because I'm assuming Mike McDaniel maybe wanted a little more autonomy, and maybe they just didn't agree on everything. I think he would have been a good fit, from my outside perspective, but maybe, Drew Petzing's a better fit for them because he does actually do a lot more of the physical, 13 personnel, get vertical, reset the line of scrimmage, run game stuff, and utilizes the tight ends much more than Mike McDaniel had. There's a little bit of that there. And it's interesting that both offenses for the Dolphins, had started much better under Mike McDaniel. And then for Drew Petzing, the Cardinals offenses have started much better in 2023, peaked in 2024. And then obviously had the litany of injuries this year where, there's not as much gold shiny dust or, gold stars on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel better. I feel better about it than I did yesterday, just because I got to read into it. Mike McDaniel, will hit on it here, just went with the Chargers. So just decided to go with the Chargers. So here's my thinking. Was he even in the radar for Detroit? Did he want to come to a cold weather area? He seems like the Capris would have got really cold, really quick here. Would it have mattered? So now that we know that he went to the Chargers and he went back out LA, maybe that was just enough pull for him here. Did the Lions want someone that could grow with us a little bit? And Petzing seems like a guy that's, although he did get a head coaching interview last year, most likely it seems like he's a guy that's probably going to get, at least a couple years in our system and have some room to grow. So I do like that. I do like his emphasis on the run game. I do like his emphasis on play action pass. After I researched everything, that's where I was like, okay, I could see where this is going, where Dan liked this guy because they probably said all those right things, right? So I am more encouraged after the 24 hours. And I think what you said initially was 100% true for a lot of Lions fans is, who is this guy, right? Al, you're like, we just ripped off the Band-Aid. He wasn't the initial guys. People did not know anything about him. So, when you don't know anything about the guy, he must suck, right? He must be the worst. But after you research and you hear the praise that he gets and, the system that he, was running, the success he had 2 years ago when his offense was healthy with Arizona, those are encouraging signs. So how about you, Jacob? 24 hours, you've had to digest this. Where are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm okay with it, as I knew that I would be, right after. This is a guy that's, he's coached quarterbacks, he's coached receivers, he's coached tight ends. He has called plays and been offensive coordinator for several years. When some of the fans look at this, I know it's funny because you just said like, if Lions fans are trying to get on Twitter or trying to like find somewhere to make themselves feel better, they're not going to feel better when they look and see what the stats were for the Cardinals last year. And they're not going to feel better when they talk to the same level of Cardinals fans who are saying, haha, in your face, like gladly, we're, glad to see him go and good riddance and all this stuff like that. But no, I mean, obviously they felt strongly about him to sign him, and to get him right away. And like you said, with Mike McDaniel, he was, he interviewed, right? It's not like they never even picked up the phone. He was here. He interviewed. Clearly, they didn't agree. They didn't see eye to eye on something, or it just didn't feel like a perfect fit. They both decided to go elsewhere, which is fine. we said that this was going to be important. We had to get somebody that was going to be able to do this job, and that we're not going to be stripping play calling duties away, that we're not going to be second guessing. So, and Brad Holmes highlighted a couple different things like leadership, detail-oriented, command over the room. These are all things that you can go back and see, like his head coach, Jonathan Gannon, spoke highly of him in regards to all of these things. Kyler Murray, talk about he's a genius. There's positive things to be said for him pretty much in all of these. And if you look at the first couple years when he took over in Arizona, I mean, they had a top 5 rushing offense like in his first season. There was, the offensive line injuries, both of the top 2 running backs were hurt this year. Like the Cardinals had a lot of things go wrong, and it was just, there's a lot of dysfunction. So, the biggest thing, I think, if you're Drew Petzing, like if you're that guy, you're like, oh my God, I just hit a home run, right? Maybe Lions fans don't feel like we hit a home run with him, but this guy, I'm sure, cannot wait to get this Lions offense and see what he can do and, start putting up those numbers again, because we have the squad to do it. We did it last year, even, with all the issues.
All right, Al. So tell us, Lions fans, because I know you've put a lot of stats on Twitter. Tell us why we should be encouraged by this hire, or what encourages you about Drew Petzing.
Muted.
I think you're muted.
There you
go. You got to start with the multiplicity of the run game and the creative ways they get into the run game. I don't expect us to use pistol like he did with Kyler Murray, but just being able to get heavy set, but also 11 personnel, be able to run gap scheme, power, counter, wind back blocks, but also still utilize zone. I think that's a big thing to check all of the boxes. Look at his influences. He was under North Turner, Kubiak, Shane Steichen, Stefanski. Like he's learned under some good offensive, even Pat Shermer, a Michigan born and raised guy. A lot of cool influences that allow for that multiplicity, and I think that's going to be a big one. Is we are obviously the Lions are going to bolster the offensive line and have it in a better position this year, right? Moving into 2026, they're going to allocate resources and get that right. And I think a big thing will be he's going to put those players in a better position to succeed. We're going to see better blocking angles, more detail-oriented, sound run game scheme, but also with a lot of the pass protection. He just seems to be a stickler for details, and I think as the season unraveled, the Lions offense lost a little bit of that soundness and those details, because that's something about Johnson. He always talked about similar to like Bill Walsh, the geometry of the football field and the details of the spacing of the routes and the different angles for blocking assignments and how you can leverage those things. I think they're going to bring that back. That's huge. That's my favorite aspect about it. And I think that almost turns into why he's so successful as a screen game play designer and how he is able to dress up those plays quite well, because by all metrics over the last 3 years, the Cardinals were a top 3 screen game offense. And, he was able to get to James Conner, but also even, Benson, Amari DeMarcado, Michael Carter. Obviously, they used Trey McBride. I think this is great news for Jameer Gibbs and for Sam Laporta. I think it's great news for Penei Sewell. I don't think we utilized Penei Sewell out in space enough this year. I feel like we got away from that a little bit. Yes, there's like 1 or 2 plays a game where, yes, he was out on a screen pass and he flattened the guy and he was downfield 20 yards. But really just like more pull blocks like they used to do with him and Frank and actually Frank's groomsman and former Arkansas offensive lineman, Yoldi Froholt, the center the last 3 years for the Cardinals. He's someone, while he's not good when he has a one technique nose tackle on him, Drew Petzing was able to use him quite well and get him out in space and cut off angles at the second level to create more daylight. So I'm really curious what he's going to do with the linemen in space, with their leverage, with their angles, and just really set them up to succeed more.
I love when I read about the screen game stat, I was ecstatic. And Jacob, I'm sure you looked into that too, and you got to be excited about that as well.
That's something we've said a long time. Like, man, why don't we utilize, like, we have the squad to do that, right? We've got Gibbs, we've got Jamo, Laporta on the screen as well. Like, we've got the players, and it just seems like we don't try that enough. And especially when they're plugging up the hole and making the runs up the middle, really hard. It's just fire 1 or 2 of them outside, make them think about it.
And it also will slow down the pass rush to get to Goff too, right? When they got to think back, we got to be ready for the screen. I like protecting Goff too, and just giving him a little more time to throw.
Especially some of those games where we started to get in trouble. You know what we're talking? I am talking specifically about when the Steelers were getting downhill a little bit too much, when it seemed like we couldn't get horizontal, with the Vikings, even early on with the Packers, when they seemed to be keying on things. And then we didn't have this pre-snap advantage, which we were used to, the Lions were used to. Let's throw in a couple more screens, because they still did it. Not only were they efficient and explosive with their screen game, they did it like the 8th most in the league. So you're going to see it 3 or 4 times a game. You're going to have to keep them on their toes. And I think that, goes back to some of the play action offense, some of their gun run principles. I think it'll just be a more diverse, while still, mastering in a lot of different things for the offense.
Yeah, if Laporta is, he's got the back injury, obviously, but if he comes back, he is so dangerous after the catch. So getting him involved in the screen game or some short passing stuff is, I am so excited with, what he was able to do at the tight end position out in Arizona. And he's got the perfect guy in Detroit to be like McBride and just take over a game. It just all depends on if Laporta is going to be healthy next year. Back injuries can be very, very touchy. So hopefully he'll be back. I want to get to a couple chats here. Dan Pask, who's, huge Lions fan.
Yeah, Dan Pask is great.
He's always on the POD stuff, but he's here too. He said, so cool. You have Al on, go POD. So, yep. We're excited to have Al on too. And then America Boxer says, I'll be really excited to see play action, keeping the defense guessing if the Lions are going to demo Gibbs or pass. And that's exactly what you said, right? Al, just slow them down a little, get them thinking. And anytime you can get a defense thinking, the receivers know right to go, and Goff knows right where to put it. So they'll be in a much better position.
A tenth of a second of hesitation. There were some games where we really lost that. And I did want to, that last comment was saying about the play action, I wanted to make sure I got this in as well. And I think you guys might agree, but it's interesting how much they still utilize the play action passing game when 2 things. Kyler Murray didn't prefer to be under center. So they were still doing that despite him not being the most ideal quarterback to be under center for play action passing. But also, we know that he has a height deficiency, that Kyler Murray does not throw well over the middle. And some of that can be attributed to, similar to, Russell Wilson or Bryce Young, where they just don't have the height to be able to deliver, 15, 20 yards down the middle, in between the hashes, over the offensive line, through the linebackers, have that vision. So I think the fact that Drew Petzing still relied that, and he's adaptable for sure, but he still relied on the play action passing game, despite not having the most ideal quarterback to do so, speaks volumes. Like, I think he's got to be supremely enthused about being able to have one of the masters at it. He's going to saddle up with Jared Goff, who he's going to be able to trust immensely, so much more than Kyler Murray, with the play action offense and the decisions he's going to be able to make to carve up the middle. So I think that's one aspect where, and there's quite a few of those, where you look at the Cardinals and people are like, people are in my comments saying mid play action passing team. Okay, don't creative with the verbiage of mid, but like, it's going to be better with our skill position players, with our Jared Goff, with our offensive line, overseeing from Dan Campbell and our offensive staff. I just think people got to keep in mind, like, this whole ecosystem is better for him, and he's now going to be in year 4 as a play caller. So I just think it's a lot of good things to come.
Yep. Jacob, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you the same thing, and also get ready for your answer. Drew Petzing does not have, a huge tie with Dan Campbell. There's really nothing that we can decipher other than, just the interview and some comments that he made a couple of years ago when they played about the offense. So does that make you happy, concerned, change anything with you, Jacob, that the fact that he doesn't have any ties with Dan Campbell prior to this?
No, none at all for me, especially when you compare, like, Johnny Morton, had all the ties and was here before, and it didn't work out. So I think it was, Dan and Brad had to sit back and say, in a period of reflection, like, maybe we do need to go with an outside hire. We do need to get somebody fresh back in here. Something's got to change. So, I didn't pay any attention to that. I gave that no thought as, like, one of the reasons why it would have been negative or positive is if he had a history here. I think it's probably a good thing that we're bringing in, fresh mind, seeing things a little bit differently, things that we can work on, things we can add differently, where, if you bring in somebody that's been in the same system, we wanted the continuity, right? We wanted to continue doing the same thing we did before. And in a weird way, it was like we kind of did, kind of didn't, and it kind of just collapsed. If people look back on this season, they look at the numbers and they look at this is one of those things where stats kind of lie. When you see how well the offense did on paper and you see all the different stats and everything like that, that's not the true way the game was going. So I like having a fresh face in here.
What about you, Al?
I preferred it, and I liked it with a lot of the Lions offensive coordinator candidates that were rumored for the interview. I was intrigued that despite all the people they were interviewing, Brian Daboll, a chummy buddy of Dan Campbell's, wasn't on the list. I thought that was supremely interesting. So I think the healthy friction is good, because look at last year. It had a little bit too much of the country club vibes. And Dan Campbell even said that at one of his last press conferences. He wants to, he paraphrased, not that they weren't competitive, but he wanted to get that competition back. He wanted to get that fieriness. So you gotta infuse it with some healthy friction there. And I'm just supremely intrigued that he brought in a guy who he had no ties to, because last year he brought in his buddy, John Morton. They brought in John Morton's buddy, David Shaw, and they were just trying to replicate the same thing they had. When all the other 31 teams in the NFL were trying to get better than last year, they were just trying to duct tape it together and keep this tree fort that had fallen apart, with duct tape and stuff together. And that's why the offense, deep down, sure, like Jacob said, they were, top 3 in points per game. On the outside looking in, on paper, that looks good, but we all watched, all 17 games, and that wasn't the same offense, and it was a shell of itself. So the healthy friction's great. I'm all for it, and the fact that he has a little bit of comfortability with Hank Fraley, but not a bunch, and that he was on that Frank Spaziani staff for Boston College with Ben Johnson is a little interesting, with that Luke Kuechly Boston College Eagles team. It's interesting, but it's, it's healthy friction. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I think it's both good and bad. Somewhat, you don't know what you're getting, so it's like a little more grab basket. But like you said, we think back to John Morton last year. That was the thing we all went back to. Well, he's worked with Jared Goff before. Dan Campbell's familiar with him. We're just going to keep running this thing back. I look at it as like I didn't play football, obviously not in the NFL or anywhere close to that. But I look at how I could equate this to my life is getting a new boss at work, right? Sometimes that just infuses, gets you to, they want to do things just slightly a bit different. It makes you think a little bit more work. Sometimes you get more productive. Now it depends on that leader, right? You could go the other way and have a bad leader and it doesn't go that way. But I'm going to trust Dan Campbell that he's got, what he thinks is a good leader in there. And, just it'll make also more fun for the guys too. Like, oh, we're going to try some new things. We're going to, we could incorporate some of this other stuff. We do play action pass. We could do, whatever we want to get to. It'll be fun. And so I am encouraged by that. I mean, I don't think it's, it's not a slam dunk that we went outside, but I did like when they went through there, like you said, Al, and all new names on the list. They did do Shaw. They did,
right.
In-house. Scotty Montgomery not listed. I don't know if he got an interview. That whole thing with Scotty Montgomery is interesting to me, like that dynamic and whether we could possibly lose him, because let's not forget there's a lot of head coaches that are going to be about to be hired, and that means there's going to be a lot of new offensive coordinators that are going to be out there too. So we might not be done with this cycle. We might have a second round of trying to replace people that we may lose, here and there. We've kind of dodged some bullets so far with, Shep in Miami. Well, I guess depending on how some people might not feel like we dodged a bullet, but I want Shep back. So I think that was a good thing. Shaw went for the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay. That's still up, I believe. So, he's probably still alive for that. And especially since Mike McDaniel, who was probably the front runner, who the Bucs wanted, just went to the Chargers. So we kind of went over this. I want to ask you, Jacob, Mike McDaniel going to the Chargers, does that make you feel better, worse, same about, Petzing coming to Detroit?
I'm sure the story right now for most Lions fans is that it's going to make them feel even worse, right? Because a consolation that most people had is like, there's a lot of head coaching positions. He probably just wants to be a head coach somewhere. And then there was that story that was like he would take a offensive coordinator position in a better spot than he would take like a bad head coaching position. So that also led people to believe like he's probably looking at us like, hopefully we're going to get this guy. So I think him going and taking another offense coordinator position probably makes people feel worse about it. You know, and unfairly, this offense this year is going to be compared to the offense in LA, right? Like they're going to be looking back. If they do better, inevitably people are going to be like, see, we could have had that. We could have had Mike McDaniel, and Dan Campbell blew it with this offensive coordinator. Or it could go the other way around. We could be like, thank God we went the way that we did. You know, time will tell that. But I do think that overall people are going to be mad that he took an offensive coordinator spot.
No. Al, I know you said you were going to do backflips if we got McDaniel. So what the news about him getting the Chargers job, OC job, do to you?
I can't blame him. He went to Justin Herbert. Again, I still think there's, I would buy Omari and Hampton stock now, but other than that, there's still a lot of questions about Herbert in general. Not that he's had a very good supporting cast. I thought he had a great season despite their offensive line issues. But again, how many injuries has Rashawn Slater had now? He was the tackle taken right after Penei Sewell. He's had a lot of injuries, but also the interior of that offensive line needs a complete reconstruction as well, similar to, but not as, more so than the Lions. Like they might need three new guys in. Mekhi Becton wasn't a fit. Zion Johnson, I don't care what you try to do, move him to center guard. He's not a fit there. I think they have some issues there. And at wideout, aside from Lad McConkey, I know that Johnson had a good season and Keenan Allen's ageless, but Rondé Godson's a good tight end. I'm curious that crew and how he's going to work with Jim Harbaugh. I'm sure they'll have more success on offense next year, but I'm not terribly jealous. I think still pretty happy with that Dan Campbell got to make his preferred decision that was best for the team this year and moving forward.
Mike McDaniel doesn't seem like a Harbaugh guy, right? Like, can you picture them having a conversation in the room and talking about the offense? It just seems really weird.
They're both out there,
Right?
I wouldn't mind a Hard Knocks Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, right.
You're right. That's must-see TV right there. Just yeah, they'll make it work. I mean, Jim will make it work, but
Yeah.
it's my feeling is that going out west and then is probably important to him. That's where he came from out there. So I'm thinking that might have been a tiebreaker situation for him. All right. What concerns do you have about Petzing? Real quick here, Al. About the hire? I mean, what are you watching for? What are your main concerns?
There definitely are concerns from 2025 after he lost Clayton Adams, his run game coordinator, offensive line coach, who I think was similarly viewed, at least I did last year when the Cowboys scooped him. And his run game design and how he helped them. And then all of a sudden it took a back seat. But, again, you have to look last year, the Cardinals started, a number of running backs, as Jacob Litton said, but also just they started at least 9 offensive linemen started 5 games. Yoldi Froholt, Paris Johnson, Isaiah Adams, Kelvin Beachum at age 36, Evan Brown, Jonah Williams, Will Hernandez, John Fryer, and John Gaines. That's insane. 11 offensive linemen total started a game, and they had 13 different combinations. So, that's not going to be, any offense is not going to have success running the ball. So they hit that wall, but I still have a little concerns that it fell apart. But I think there's good reason for that. But also just some of the straight drop back game, some of the play sequencing. And I wanted to look at some of the stuff on third down and red zone. I haven't gotten into it yet, but I know that some people, who thought it was a fine hire, still have some questions about some of the passing tree, some of the route tree that he has.
Yep. Yeah, I have those same concerns too. And honestly, we're going to have those until mid-season, most likely. Like after week 1, we were all ready to fire Morton. After week 2, we were ready to say, oh, we lucked out. We did way better. So no one knows until mid-season. We're going to have, that's when Dan Campbell says you start, after 4 or 5 games, you start to get you hopefully get your identity of your team. That was the problem with the Lions this year. We never developed that, right? We just didn't develop it. And Jacob and I kept talking the podcast, is this going to be the week that we start the run? And it just never hit that. So hopefully we get a good sense by midseason what this offense is. And my opinion with Drew is that it's going to go as far as this offensive line takes us. We got to do the proper fixes to fix our interior offensive line. We got to figure out what Taylor's going to do. Is Taylor Decker going to retire? And then if that is, then that's a huge position, left tackle to fill, or could be right tackle if we move Panay over, depending on who's out there. I don't see them moving Panay. I think they want him on the right side, but depending on who's out there and what kind of fit they work, and I could see them moving Panay over to the left side. But to me, that's where it's Drew's only going to show success as much as our offensive line is, and that's where our identity comes from. What do you think, Jacob?
Yeah, it's hard for me just because the main concerns, like when you look pop up, are all from last year, and it's mostly, like Al said, the offensive line, the running back injuries, like everything that he had going against him. I also think just in general, like the coaching staff and the team was dysfunctional. Jonathan Gannon, the head coach, was a defensive-minded coach, so I don't know exactly, what he saw or how he wanted. Maybe he wanted the offense ran differently. Maybe he had a hand. He wasn't calling the plays, but maybe he had a certain idea of how he wanted things to go. Kyler Murray is hurt. I mean, the thing was unraveling. When you have Jacoby Brissett, throwing for 500 yards, like, yeah, whatever it was, 480 yards on the surface is great, but it's because you ran for 20 yards and you were getting blown out. So, it's hard. It's still too soon for me to really say about the concerns. I haven't dove in deep enough with that, but from what I saw last year, I think he gets kind of a free pass and a clean slate here.
Yep. Yeah, I think you just got to keep an open mind with him. I think there's some people that's already decided it's terrible because it wasn't Mike McDaniel or someone that they knew about. And then there's other people that are going to be like, oh, he's going to be fine because look at it 2 years ago. None of us know until we get to see it. We're going to get a tiny glimpse in training camp. And then, we won't know until real bullets are going. So, Al, this OC has come in. What do you think we're going to be looking for as far as free agents or draft? Like, I don't necessarily need names, but what positions are you thinking that we're going to have to hit in regards to Drew's offense he wants to run?
I think it'd be in the best interest of the Lions, first and foremost, to not worry about running back. David Montgomery would thrive in that James Conner role. So whatever some of the hearsay was or Instagram posts about him possibly not being a Lion, no matter what his contract is, $8 million or whatever, I think it's got to be Gibbs and Montgomery with him. I think it makes too much sense. I think they would have a beautiful thing going there. Let's just not worry about running back, right? All right. Same with backup quarterback. I think we're fine with Kyle Allen for this season as well. Let's not allocate resources there. Jared Goff still playing really phenomenal ball. They don't have to worry about his heir apparent yet. Let's eliminate those. And truly, I would prefer let Isaac Tesla continue to grow. Bring Khalif Raymond back. Okay, we don't have to worry about wide receiver. No, let's let Jackson Meeks and some of the younger guys maybe be that wide receiver 5. I love it. I don't want to use any resources really. I'm fine with concentrating obviously on defense, but offensively, tight end. Go and get you one tight end in the draft, one in free agency. In free agency, there's too many free agent tight ends. It's a really good crop, and I don't think we're going to get some of the David Njoku, some of those guys who are more Chig Okoronkwo, who's more of a receiving guy. Go get someone who, like Charlie Kohler from Baltimore, who I think would be an upgrade from Brock Wright. I think Brock Wright needs to compete for tight end 3 this year. I would like to bring in like a Charlie Kohler or a Daniel Bellinger, and even possibly like a Connor Hayward, play a little bit of H-back role, get creative there. But also, go in the draft, day 3, find a butt kicker, find a sledgehammer. I don't care about his hands. Just find someone you can line up at tight end in that 13 personnel they want to run and utilize him. Similar to the Bills did with Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech this year. They got him, and he's an absolute butt kicker, right? Like he helped open up that offense. Same with Notre Dame tight end Mitchell for the Panthers. I thought he did some really cool things. Go and get you a rookie wide receiver or a tight end that can block immediately and a proven blocker with some receiving threat as a tight end too. And then other than that, it's figuring out the combination on the offensive line. Like I truly wouldn't be surprised, and I'd be okay with it. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Decker. If they went and got someone that would be this year's Kevin Zeitler at left guard, because I don't love the options at center right now, both in the draft and at free agency. I mean, everyone loves Tyler Linderbaum. I'm not considering it. Maybe you go and get a Joel Bitonio or an Isaac Sayamalu or even a Tevin Jenkins. He's younger, but like get one of those stopgap guys who'd be dependable for a year and allow Christian Mahogany maybe to sit in year 3 and be that, 4th interior offensive lineman, and then, go and get like a Cade Mays or a McGovern at center And also just draft a tackle in the first or second round, and draft the center of the future in, second, fourth round, something like that.
What about you, Jacob? Where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, he already said it. There's the outside, the skill positions and stuff like that. I would be completely fine if we bring back pretty much the same core. Really want David Montgomery back. I don't like the talks of him not being here. But yeah, absolutely. I think you need to focus on the offensive line. And it's going to be interesting to see how much they dedicate to the offensive line and how much they dedicate to the defense. I do not want to draft another wide receiver. I don't want to draft a quarterback. I mean, we talked about that before, but I think we're in a good spot with that here. I just feel like we need help now, right? We need these players that can come in now. I also, like Al talked about the tight ends, most of the tight ends that we had to fill in, I know they were not draft picks or anything like that, but it was just, they all seemed like run blocking tight ends, and where Sam Laporta could do some damage to the passing game, they just were not able to do that at all. And it really kind of, put a hold on the offense on what we were able to do because we didn't have a tight end that could really stretch the field. Brock Wright, not a great pass catcher. I mean, just not any of the other guys that we got in there. I can't remember the name now.
I wouldn't even say if like Anthony Ferks or Ross Dwelly or Giovanni Ricci or any of those were even blocking tight ends. They weren't receiving or blocking.
Right. They were almost filler. But yeah, so it would be nice to have somebody that actually can play and contribute instead of having to just be what it was. So I'm interested to see how much we go with the offense, how much we go with the defense. We have to help out with the offensive line. I like what Al said about getting a veteran, maybe in for a year or so, letting Mahogany sit. I would be completely on board with something like that. But in my opinion, I think that's where you have to look. Round one is getting a tackle. Now, I would also say that even if Decker plans on coming back, I think that we need one right away. I might be doing backflips if Frank says he's coming back, this year. I'm still holding out hope for that because that changes things dramatically, which just, that's what helps the engine move is the offensive line. And it wasn't good enough last year. That's the number one spot that we need to look at. However, we have to do it, free agency, draft, combination of the both. That's what you're looking at with the offense. Do you agree, Jason, or what do you?
I am 100% on board. Tight end, we just need competition in that room. Zylstra's not it. I mean, he's had enough chances. It's not going to work for him. Make further down on the depth chart, maybe, but we just, especially with Laporta's injury, like that's a big question mark for me. Like a back injury is funky, man. It's going to affect his blocking next year, which really sucks because we noticed some run game deficiencies when Laporta was out, and especially Brock Wright went right around the same time. And then we start, Al, you said it, like, we're not even going to call these guys blocking tight ends, right? They were just roster spots at guys that took up positions on the field, but we could not count on them for very much, or if anything at all. So we need just competition in that room. We're going to need to sign couple free agents. I don't care if they're even further down on the depth chart. We just need competition in there. We're going to need to draft one too. And I wouldn't say, not a day 1, day 2 pick, but further down the day 3, we definitely need to be looking at tight end. Now, offensive line, again, we need competition in that room. Now, I want a solution at center, really, unless, behind the scenes, they were working Tate in practice that we don't know about, getting some center reps and have a really good feel about that. I don't want to go into training camp going, let's try Tate and see if it doesn't work out, then we're going to go to plan B. I want to have a solution going in. Even if it's a veteran guy with some experience that we could count on, and then, we still try Tate in training camp just to, cross train him and then see if he's going to be in that role and in the future. But I don't want to go into what we did with training camp this year and then just totally change it. And, it just never gelled. And with Graham could be a cut casualty or cut and resign. I mean, I don't want to go in with him center number 1 this year. But if we cut Graham and we could resign him as depth, I'd be okay with that. Graham's okay with depth for me further down the list, but I'd prefer to get upgraded as a starter. You brought up the thing about Mahogany. I don't know if we have a more competent center. He's playing over there. Taylor Decker was playing with one shoulder the whole year. That really weared on him. So I'm not really willing to give up on him yet, but we just need to upgrade that whole room. And in case stuff like this happens, it just never gelled this whole year. I'm encouraged by what I saw with Tate, his growth over the year. I was happy that he remained healthy because he had some injury issues in college. He played every game this year, so I was encouraged by that. We know what we have in Panay. We just need both. We both need to draft people to develop, and we also need. I think we need like the Zeitler guy, like you said, like bring in someone that we
Joel
can count on.
Batonia or an Isaac Sayamalu. And I want to be clear that I'm not giving up on Christian Mahogany. I just think that we can't have unknowns like we did this year as many. And we want to assume that the progress is going to be linear for Tate Ratledge, but I don't know if we can assume that. So I don't feel good with where Christian's at right now. That I think he would be better as the number 3 guard, learning from a veteran, and then in year 4 for him, in a contract year, let him start. I am totally comfortable with that, and him getting maybe a couple spot starts next year, and then hopefully the Lions are re-signing him. I think that if you get that out of a 6th round pick, that's incredible.
Now, the only thing I will say is I like the idea of bringing Khalif back. However, if we're going to change our wide receiver position, I would love to get someone that could return kicks to do a kickoff returner.
Punt. Yeah.
We just didn't have that guy this year, and I just want a threat back there. I'd really like to see that work with, see if we could just get some extra field position on that. If you're looking at Arizona, Dortch is that guy, right? I mean, he's a free agent for Arizona. He has special teams. He's a wide receiver. He's going to be further down the depth chart. He's been with Petzing. He's familiar with him. Not saying that's going to happen, but that's the guy that I'm looking at. Like, hey, that's possible. Someone to look at. But if Khalif is coming back, it would be fine with me too, because he's still a threat with the punt return. They did try him at kick return. It just didn't seem to be. He's not big enough for that role. Like, I know that Phipp wants a bigger, stronger guy in there. He's fearless, but he's also, there's only so much contact he's going to be able to take. So I'll be interested to see what happens with that. But it's all with the offensive line. It's the engine that makes the car move. They learned their mistake last year. I just don't see them, going in and taking chances this year. They're going to. I feel like we're going to get some free agents in here. They're going to go heavy in the draft. I just don't see us, especially with the Taylor Decker thing hanging out there. If we get I would be shocked if we don't get a 1st round tackle. Definitely 1st or 2nd round, we're going to have a tackle. I guarantee that.
Now, if Francis Mauago from Miami falls to 17, Jason, would you be open to Penei Sewell moving to left side? Like, I would prefer they are picking the best tackle possible, irrespective of left tackle or right tackle, because I think regardless, Penei Sewell could be an all-pro at left side or right side, even if it takes a month and a half to adjust. It took a little while for Tristan Wirfs to adjust too when he switched.
Yeah. I think Panay's an all-world talent, all-time talent. He's going to be you go to Panay and he's going to say, put me whatever makes this team better. And that's exactly what Hank Fraley will do. That's what Dave Campbell will do. So I'm confident in that Panay will be able to do whatever we need to do. Now, will there be some growing pains? Probably, but you're hoping in training camp that he's, working all that stuff out, and we'll figure it out. But yes, we need to upgrade the offensive line. So whatever the best way we do that, I'm open to all that. And I think that's going to be a fun discussion that we have as we get closer to draft time for sure. What about you, Jacob? You okay with moving Panay?
I like the continuity, but obviously, if that's the best, if that's what's going to make the offensive line better, then absolutely. And if we are getting a rookie, and the way to make them most impactful right away is to let them play on the right side and move Panay, I would much rather that be the case than to draft them. Let's say somebody that's only played on the right side. You draft him, say we're going to move you to the left, and now you're going to be blocking guys like Myles Garrett. And I think moving Panay over would probably be more comfortable and easier for the new rookie to have an impact right away. I think moving Panay would be better than moving a rookie.
Yep, I agree.
Not that I like moving Panay, but if that's what's going to help with the offensive line, that's going to, make us better, then I'm all for it.
All right. Anything else you guys got on Drew before we move over to the defensive front 7?
No, I did want to share really quick. I did have a text to the group chat 5-6 weeks ago, my Lions group chat, just saying, if the Cardinals clean house I would also be interested in their offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, being part of our offensive staff, even if he's probably way too overqualified to just be a tight end coach. That was probably right after Tyler Rule came out. So yeah. I really was intrigued by him just coming in and being part of this, being part of the nucleus. Yeah. So, and I admitted, I'm like, he's overqualified for tight end coach. I know he's a history of it, but it was right. It was before the Steelers game or after Thanksgiving when I said it. So it was when Tyler Roll had gotten the Iowa State gig.
Yeah. Stuck it out through the rest of the season, and that's good for him, man. He seemed like a good guy in the press conference, so I'm happy for him, but it's always tough when you lose talent. All right. I'm going to let you direct the conversation on this, Al, because this is the topic that I know that, you felt strongly about, you want to talk about. So defensive front seven. So I'm going to start with a question for you, and then I'm going to let you kind of direct the conversation from here. So what changes did Shep do in regards to the front seven in comparison to AG that you noticed this year?
I think they were running more 3 linebacker sets, less nickel, and some of that might have been because of the injuries, obviously, to defensive backfield. But I also realized I felt like we were less impactful with the pass rush stunts, which had bothered me a little bit. And then he was not receptive to adjusting from that 5-man down front with the 5 position, the big end. When they lost Levi Onwuzurike, when they lost Josh Pascal, they didn't have an ideal player for that role, and yet we still were stuck with Pat O'Connor rotating in there, Tyler Lacey, obviously it was well documented, Alim McNeil. So just he was a little too rigid in requiring that to be part of it when it was getting away from getting the best 11 on the field and allowing those 11, because none of those players were good in that role. And I think it really was impacting the defense. And it also, in addition to the 4I wasn't totally happy with the Sam linebacker role overall with Derek Barnes this past season. And when Trevor Nowaski, even when he went in there, those were 2 spots that just felt like whenever they were in there, and I used to love some of the things Aaron Glenn would do there, it was just, square peg, round hole. It bothered me. And I know everyone was bothered by the Lee McNeil thing and playing out of position and him, not bouncing back as well, aside from that, Tampa Bay game and maybe the Giants game. But just wanted to address that those 2 positions, they might look for that in the draft, or they might need to be a little multiple on defense and be more flexible. And that includes possibly finally giving in and just looking for a defensive end who can be a speed rusher and is a little more bendy, has some of those traits. So those are just some things I had on my mind watching the front seven. What do you guys think of those thoughts?
Jake, I want to let you start with you because I think you're going to talk about Al-Quadin Muhammad and just not getting when Al said not getting the best 11 on the field. I know this is going to be something you want to talk about. So I'm going to let
definitely
you go.
Part of it.
Yeah.
It bothered me. I mentioned it week in and week out about that. It just was like when he's out there, it seemed like Al-Quadin Muhammad is making an impact. He filled that pass rushing role that we need. He had like a multi-sack game and everything. He was getting back there. And it was like you looked at the snap count. It's like, why? Why did he only play 20 snaps in that game? And he had 2 sacks or whatever the one. It was it really bothered me that instead of having that power guy, and he had speed too. Really, we kept sticking with the bigger defensive lineman out there, and it just wasn't working. I mean, they're plugging up space. They're not getting any pressure, and it doesn't help if they're chasing Caleb Williams the other side of the field. Like maybe they get a pressure because they got close enough. That's not a true pressure. That's not helping us out. I will say I did like that week 1, they had a couple plays, I think, where like Aiden Hutchinson lined up on the line. They had him drop into coverage. It's like, what the hell are we doing? Like, I do not like this at all. And I believe it was only that 1 week. I don't know that he did it again the whole season.
There was a few other times he dropped.
It was like, please don't do that. And
they had Marcus Davenport drop. They had Marcus Davenport drop a few times later on in the season when he came back from injury.
On third down, let's get after the quarterback. Well, let's send 3 and we'll drop our best pass rusher into coverage and take him out of the play. Yeah, so I did not like that. And I attributed that to maybe just growing pains and trying to feel out how he wanted the defense to look. But yeah, the biggest issue with me, like you said, the best 11 on the field. I know the injuries and stuff happen, which sucks when it happens in the secondary. Obviously, he's got a history with the linebackers and everything like that. I know this season really bothered Shep because he has a very particular way that he wanted things to work. He had a very particular vision for this defense and how this was going to happen, and it just didn't happen the way that he wanted it to. The biggest gripe that I have is just the rotation of players that we use on the defensive line and how we use the defensive line. I'm completely okay with like the 3 linebacker set and everything that we were doing. I will say I don't think Derek Barnes played up to his potential. I don't think Anzalone played particularly up to his potential. Jack Campbell had a great year. For the other two, maybe not quite as much. But yeah, the defensive line, it felt like we just did not put Alim in a position to succeed. We did not use Al-Quadin Muhammad enough out there. And I mean, now I'm sure he's going to go elsewhere because he showed enough where he's probably going to get a bigger contract than what he deserves. But you got Lacey out there and Wheat and like all these big guys that are just on the edge, not helping. It's just frustrating. So I think it was just a personnel issue, honestly, on most of that, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, if you look at Thanksgiving game even and how the Packers were able to really throw the ball, really like that's how they were winning, and there was 62 snaps in that game. Why in heaven's name is Al-Quadin Muhammad only on the field for 19 snaps out of 62 against Jordan Love dropping back almost 40 times?
Yep. Man.
Stuff like that. That'll get you.
I love Shep. I think that he's going to develop into something good. I just have faith in that. But the thing is that he just seemed really stubborn this year. And regardless of what was happening on the field, he's like, we're just going to, this is the way I do things and this is the way it's going to run. He'd say he pounded his table and said a team hadn't run over him when, in fact, we watched that and we knew that was false. I mean, the Rams ran all over, like, especially later in the season. Once Branch went down, we were getting run, we could not stop the run. And even early in the season, Jacob and I talked about we were not, this is where Barnes comes in and Anzalone. We were not, the cutbacks were, these running backs were getting huge cutback runs on us and they were not holding that edge. And it was every time I looked, it's Barnes and Anzalone. They were over pursuing and just not getting there. And I was really disappointed overall, like in the year. I mean, Campbell had an amazing year, and he saved that linebacking crew because Anzalone, yes, he could cover, and I think that's going to be a huge area that we're going to have to look at going into next year is having a linebacker that can cover because Anzalone is, if not the best, one of the best in the league at that linebacker position, being able to cover. If you look at his QB rating against, it's like 73. It's one of the top linebacker scores for QB rating against. So that's going to be something to look at. But one thing, Barnes playing, especially in that Sam role, you want to be able to have someone to blitz. And on these stunts, we were not getting pressure from our linebackers enough. I mean, Jack Campbell developed better than I expected him to. He had 5 sacks this year, and he was able to get home some that more than he had in his first 2 seasons. So I was encouraged by that. But we need to have, if we're going to lose Anzalone, we need a pass rushing linebacker or someone that could get through on blitzes and create real pressure and be dangerous in that aspect. If we're going to give up coverage, then we need to gain it somewhere else, and then we need to take time away from the quarterback that has time to throw. Jacob was right when he says that, we're getting some pressures. We had a lot of empty pressures this year that just got there way too late, and the plays were developed on the field, and that's why we got burned on 3rd and long a lot, because we were just getting there way too late, and the routes have already developed, and we were so hurt in the secondary that these guys were running wide open back there. So some of that could be helped with better secondary, getting Branch and Kirby back. However, that's a big ask, right? Because they're both coming off Kirby's got an injury, which we don't know, the full extent of, and Branch has come back from Achilles, which if he loses some explosiveness, that's really going to affect his play. Right. So it'll be interesting. But what did you think about the Sam role? Like you said, do you think now that Anzalone's gone, are we going to move Barnes back into Anzalone's role maybe and then look for another Sam linebacker? Or what? How do you see that developing this upcoming year?
It's a good question. I am very intrigued how they handle it. And I think you both are right about like the stunts and the blitzes just lacked urgency. There wasn't forceful urgency. Like really, they weren't timed well. They were slow developing. Why were they not more crisp? That was really bothersome. And I think some of that stems back from the 5 down front that was just not being athletic enough. And that comes back to Derek Barnes, where I don't know what role he should play. I didn't like him, like you said, when he was losing the edge both front side and losing the backside containment as well. So I don't know if we need to continue to try and find a Sam linebacker. I think he could be a solid will next to Jack Campbell, but I do have a lot of questions, like you said, about fulfilling the Alex Anzalone role, where, you know, on third down, he was a maven. He's incredibly talented, both zone and especially man coverage. And I have concerns about how Derek Barnes will fit into that equation. I don't think he's, you know, he is a master of none. He just wears a lot of hats, but to how well he wears them is a question. And where he fits as one part of the best 11, I think, is a really intriguing question. And why I wanted to bring it up, because I don't have the answers, but I do think it's something that we need answers from going into this offseason of how do they envision the front seven looking, or front six, if they run more nickel or even 3 safety sets, maybe, hopefully get a little more modern. But I'm just very curious how they handle the edge position and the linebackers, and even if we're going to try and fit more 4-eye people into the equation, because I think Derek Barnes needs to play a lot better next year. And maybe it is just in a more settled role. And you saw towards the end of the season, he was playing a little bit more stand-up linebacker. Maybe that's where he needs to settle in permanently.
Yeah.
I think one thing we need to remember with the front seven is Alim was coming off a really serious injury. So I'm sure, you know, I'm hoping in year 2 that he's going to be back and getting him played in position, interior line, where we can use some interior pass rush, use some of that explosiveness, and where, you know, putting on the outside, he's not I don't care how good a first step he has. He's not an edge. He's not going to be able to develop pressure out there. We need someone to develop pressure up the middle. And, you know, he's also really good in the run game too, to have him stuff in the middle next to looks like Tyleek this year. So, what do you think about that, Jacob? I mean, you got to be excited about Alim coming back next year healthy.
I will reserve that judgment because, I mean, he's coming off an injury, but I mean, he said he was ready to go, right? He felt as good as ever. A lot of times they say that when they're still a little slow to get it. I don't think if you put him, you know, if you're watching film and you're looking at Alim, I don't think he's necessarily looking slower or looking different. I mean, maybe the team as a whole looks a little bit slower. It's just looking different like that. So I don't know that you can just chalk that up to the injury. I'm hoping that's what it is, and that he comes out on fire next year and is right back to what he was before. I don't think he got a sack this year, right? 0 sacks. I don't think he had a sack.
I think he ended up with one on a scramble.
Okay.
I can't remember which game it was, but it was later in the season.
Yeah. But, you know, just not, it wasn't
just one.
For instance, when you got like Roy Lopez, like in the limited capacity where he's bullying guys and he's kind of getting back there and he's making his presence known, you didn't see that for Alim. And it was almost like, man, is he out there? Like, did Alim play? Like, you know, you have to look up close. And him and Tyleek kind of look the same from far away. It's kind of hard to tell, but, you know, I'm hoping for the best, and I'm hoping that it is just kind of a down year due to the injury, but I don't know that that's what it is.
I think with ACLs are more common now, but it is so common for a man his size to bounce back much better in year 2. I'm definitely on the same side as you, that I'm pretty enthusiastically optimistic that we'll get more of the slim, the twinkle toes that Lions fans got to know from, you know, really 2022, starting with that Giants game, to 2023 and 2024 pre-injury.
He looked, ironically, his first game back was probably the best that he looked, like in that Bucks game. That was his first game back. He was getting pressure like almost immediately, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is what we've been missing. And then it disappeared for the longest time. And part of that was due to the stubbornness of putting him on the outside. And I don't know. And do you feel, Al, that we delayed on some of these stump blitzes and stuff like that because we were so concerned about the run game that we don't want to, you know, rush too quickly and screw up the run game, but then, you know, we're allowing 3rd and 10s and, you know, to be completed at such a criminally high rate. So is that what you think happened?
Yeah, I have my concerns about that they were not able to unleash. It was so bothersome that it just felt too slow on the 3rd and longs. It was something that just lacked refined urgency. And I understand, you know, they want to two-gap these guys, keep them clear for Jack and Alex, but I'd much rather see a little bit more aggressiveness moving forward.
Yeah, it from hearing them talk, it's like their first inclination is it's going to be a run that we're going to play that. So then that decreases the urgency to get there. But when you're on 3rd and 10, you're right. We need urgency to get back to that quarterback. And it
has to be
affected
crisp.
It
Just
does.
felt lethargic sometimes with some of their stunts and their blitzes. It just you look at some of these other teams that are still in the playoffs and you look at the Seahawks with their simulated pressures, or you watch Indiana last night in the championship game, or Miami being terrors off the edge, and it feels like it doesn't have a crispness in the pass rush attack plan.
Right. And to me, it's like, well, people are going to attack Brian Holmes for not having that defensive end. You had the guy. You had Al-Quadi Muhammad. You had the guy. He had double-digit sacks. And like Jacob says, he's getting 20 snaps a game, 25 snaps a game. You have the guy. Like, some of that scheme and just the stubbornness to not put him out there. It blows my mind to think about it. And especially that second half of the year, Branch went down, and we just needed, to put pressure on that quarterback to save our secondary. And they talk about the pass rush has to match the secondary. There wasn't. It was quite the opposite, actually.
And I hope that I like you. I believe in Kelvin Shepard. I'm glad they're keeping him, and let's get a veteran voice in there to help him transition and ascend a little bit more, a veteran coaching voice in year 2, and get a little more comfortable. And then let's see if he can get rolling and be less rigid and more adaptable.
I think, Jacob, you pointed that out, right? We need a senior advisor, someone that's, that could be a sounding board for Shep.
Right. I like Shep, keep Shep. We just need somebody else in that room, right? Shep's calling the shots, but we've got to have somebody that's been around longer. And like just Al said, veteran presence. That would be the perfect situation to have somebody else in there, someone to bounce ideas off of. Like I said earlier, a fresh set of eyes, fresh face, somebody that looks at it from a different angle.
Yeah, and not that Jim O'Neill, he has experience. He's been a DC before, both college and NFL level. I think he's a very good safeties coach. And Casey Rogers has been a veteran coach for a while, and he's a run game coordinator. But if you look at those first few years with Aaron Glenn, he had John Fox. He had Dom Capers. Get some of those guys in there. Even if they're a little past their prime as a DC, they had some really good years where they had cool things. And their special assignment is just find ways to add to this. How can we build off of this? What are other layers we can add on here to improve this? What's not working?
Fresh set of eyes and just another sounding board, just someone that could say, Shep, hey, have you thought about this? Have you looked at this? And Shep's a smart guy. He's been in the league. He knows what's up. He's had the talks with Dan Campbell. I'm sure that he's going to come back next year fired up and ready to go. I'm confident in that. I just need a little more flexibility with what's available out there, and hopefully less injuries too, right? That would always help.
Right.
All right.
Stay healthy for 1 year.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about, I want to know your opinion about the run defense. Lions always pride themselves on having, really, run first. We're going to stop the run. In the second half, especially, we were getting gashed. What did you think happened there? I mean, was it a matter of injuries in the secondary? Was it something else? What did you think, Al? Why was our run defense not as dominant this year?
I think, it was a combination of really the Brian Branch of it all and the safeties. That does affect it a little bit more. Some of those rushing lanes they had, because he really is that eighth man in the box. But I don't have answers for the Steelers game and the Rams game. Just were so bad. They were really pathetic. I don't understand how Arthur Smith was able to really maximize every rushing attack they had there. And the offensive line for the Steelers and the Rams was kicking the Lions' butt, and it didn't make sense, for how much pride they take in, two gapping and stopping the run before it gets going. There's some real bad numbers for the rushing yards before contact per attempt. It was not promising. So that's something they got to go roll back the tape and get fixed.
That's demoralizing when the run. Well, it's demoralizing anyway when the running is working, but when they're getting 5 or 6 yards that felt like up the field before anybody's touching them, and they're just bursting through the seams or out on the outside. Somebody's always taking the wrong angle or in the wrong spot. No, we already mentioned like Anzalone and Barnes just feel like they were choosing the wrong gap or just almost like they were running the wrong play or something. Like, it happened way too frequently. And, towards the end of the season like that, just terrible. Hard to watch, with the Vikings and yeah.
Well, Al, I think we've been on for a while. I think we're going to wrap up here. Is there anything else that you want to talk about the defensive front seven before we wrap it up here?
No, I just look forward to seeing what they can do to build around Tyleek, get Alim back, and Aiden Hutchinson, Jack Campbell, and hopefully get healthy at safety.
Yeah, I agree. So, Al, I want to tell you, I really appreciate you giving us the time, your expertise. You've been fun to get to know a little bit here and talk with. I really appreciate it. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out. Can't wait for next time.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
All right.
We'll make sure, because I know you spent a lot of time at training camp. We're going to definitely have to hit you up with your eyes there. That's when my eyes got open to you, really, Al, when you were on with Jeremy doing the training camp talks. You did a phenomenal job with that. So if you're not a Pride of Detroit subscriber, I highly recommend you get one before training camp to follow those, because those daily training camp wrap-ups, for us, diehard Lions fans, they give you it's like you're there. So I do highly recommend that.
The daily updates and the progress and the promise, and there's just so much optimism. I couldn't love training camp updates more.
I know. It's awesome. So Al, check him out on Pride of Detroit. Follow him on Twitter. He's always got great stats, great insights. He's a great follow on Twitter. So do that. It's even in the offseason, especially when Drew Petzing information dropped. Boom, tons of stats. I was able to follow everything. So it's a good deal. So while you're following Al on Twitter, you can follow us. You can follow us on Spotify, on YouTube. Al, thank you for your time. Jacob, it's great seeing you. I'm glad you got home safe. I'm Jason.
Always.
Let's go Lions.
Go Lions. Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Jason.
Yep. All right.